Who is it okay to murder? I get a little confused these days as I watch dueling and often nonsensical opinions battle it out online. See, the people that expressed outrage that Daniel Penny was found not guilty seem to be the same people jumping for joy that a CEO of a health insurance company was gunned down like a rabid dog in the street. Where are your first principles? If we can't all agree that murder is bad, even when you look like Dave Franco, then we don't have a society. Sure, murder is expedient, and if it was approved, then we could really clear up the issue of people driving slow in the fast lane. But the problem with society is that, okay, killing certain groups of people is that first they come for the bourgeoisie, and then they come for you. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Oh, hello, everyone. On this week's episode, we have a couple of topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the murder of the United Healthcare CEO, going to talk about Syria, as well as the Supreme Court arguments about giving medicines to kids who say they are trans. But first, we're going to talk about our favorite comment from last week. We have Bonnie Cozens, who said, quote, Biden's been lying all his life. FJB, FHB, end quote. My goodness, Bonnie, the language. I can't believe it. Biden is a habitual liar and has been for the entirety of his public life that has now spanned hundreds and hundreds of years. So I agree. Yeah, he's a bad person. I don't particularly like him, and his son is even worse. Can't wait to see him leave the presidency. I agree with you, Bonnie, although I wouldn't use such coarse language. My goodness, it's not ladylike. Anyway, now on to our first topic. We're going to talk about the healthcare murder. Dun, dun, dun. I think most people who are online now have seen the video. Mike, hold on one second. Look at this. This cat. Hello. She's just sitting there clawing my leg right now. Just very happy I'm home, I guess, but just still annoying, Winnie. I don't know how to deal with that. Everyone has seen the video, I think. If you're online, you probably saw the video. They played it on the news. They were playing it on cable. It's going around YouTube and everywhere that you probably are watching this podcast. People have talked about this issue. So you've seen the video of the assassination, which is what it was. It was not we use the term murder to mean what it means. Murder means murder. It doesn't mean killing someone in self-defense. It doesn't mean manslaughter. And an assassination is an assassination. You don't get in a bar fight and then kill someone and say, oh, you assassinated him. It's not the way it works. This was an assassination. This was a targeted hit on this one in particular individual for a targeted specific region. We didn't know that last week when this was just coming out. We know this now because the alleged, you have to say alleged, even though I think by all accounts this guy did it, alleged shooter has been caught. So what happened, in case you were living under a rock the last week and don't know what we're talking about? Basically, the video that was going around, it shows a man. He's walking down the street. This guy in a hoodie has a little cross-body bag or a backpack that he had in front of him. He opens it up. He pulls out a silenced pistol. He shoots the guy in the back. The guy kind of stumbles into a wall. He shoots him a couple more times. The guy falls, and then you see the man in the hoodie, the assassin in the hoodie, leave. That's the video. And this whole thing, it started a manhunt. It was a giant deal because the person who was murdered, this guy named Brian Thompson, he is the CEO of United Healthcare, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the country, which I assume makes it one of the largest insurance companies on the planet. I would think that's true. I don't know that for a fact, but I know a lot of other countries that are large have more of a national healthcare, so private insurance companies. This has to be one of the largest in the world. Brian Thompson was the CEO of this company. He was assassinated because he was the CEO of this company. There were a lot of theories going around as to why this might be. There was some talk of some financial things that are going on within the company right now. It appears none of that is really the reason why this man was assassinated, because they have caught the alleged gunman, this man named Luigi Mangione, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. And he had a 200-word, he didn't spend a lot of time on it, apparently. You would think someone who was going to go through the hassle of becoming an assassin would at least spend some time on his manifesto. But he had a 200-word manifesto written, basically a page and a half, that said, hey, I don't like the healthcare system. This guy is part of a company. They deny claims to people. He's responsible for the murder of tens of thousands of people because his company disputes and denies claims, blah, blah, blah. He's a bad person, and I killed him for it. This is juvenile, nonsensical thinking that has no place in society because it is, by all accounts, this Luigi Mangione is a smart person. He obviously has at least a middling to probably high IQ based on his academic resume. He's not a dumb person, but this is the line of thinking that happens when you might be a smart person on paper, but you are a dumb person. You lack wisdom in life. This is the kind of thinking that you wind up with. This is juvenile, facile thinking. And the reason why I say this is because you're talking about a chain of causation that makes no sense. And your solution, which you acknowledge is not really a solution, in your own words, to kill the head of this company, it changes nothing. So you've accomplished nothing except making yourself an immoral, terrible person who, if you believe in any sort of religion, you basically just condemn yourself to whatever the worst form of punishment in your religion is once you die. You've basically condemned yourself to that. There's no coming back from cold-blooded assassination. You're not fixing anything. You acknowledge as much in your manifesto. And your identification of the problem, the thing that you've pinpointed, is the greed, which is why you would go after a CEO. You say, well, the CEO is responsible. He's more concerned. Profits over people. That's the name of the game in the insurance industry. The insurance industry operates on a 2% profit margin. This is not a lot. This is like a restaurant. A restaurant operates off of basically a 2% profit margin. The profit margins in insurance are very slim. The problem is that healthcare costs are incredibly expensive. Healthcare costs are expensive for a variety of reasons, none of which really are Brian Thompson's fault, this man you have murdered in cold blood. And your solution to kill a husband and a father is one of, you can tell where your inspirations lie. You might consider yourself a French revolutionary because that's what you've done. You have assassinated a man to start this revolution that accomplishes nothing. So your healthcare is broken in America. It is not a good system that we have, but blaming the insurance companies for that is not going to solve anything because it's not the insurance companies that have set up the system. The insurance company is there because that is the system, but they didn't set this system up. You can say, well, it's the lobbyists in Washington, it's this and that. The reality is that healthcare in this country could be fixed. It could be better, but we still provide the best healthcare in the world. That is absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt true. The best healthcare in the world is in the United States. It's just expensive, and occasionally, because it is a profit-based business, there are certain people who don't have access to the best forms of healthcare. But it does exist in this country, and it's not the problem of Brian Thompson that's the system. We could go into why the healthcare system needs to be overhauled or what we could do differently or my ideas, blah, blah, blah. That's not really the point of what we're talking about right now, so we won't get into it. But what I want to talk about is this guy becoming a folk hero, a modern-day Robin Hood, if you will, and how despicable that is. This idea that the same people who will tell you that words are violence, if you misgender somebody or you say something hurtful, you say a word that you're not supposed to. Like, the same people who are celebrating Luigi Mangione as a hero are the same people who think that you, I don't know, should be thrown in prison if you use the N-word. Now, should people go around using hateful speech? Should you go around being mean? No, that's not the point. The point is, you can say words are violence, but then when you excuse actual violence, I have a hard time understanding where you lie. People on the left claim to be compassionate. They're actually saying that this murder is justifiable based on compassion. Oh, it's okay to murder the greedy CEO of this company because his company is responsible for denying claims to people. And the people who are denied claims, sometimes they don't get the best care, and then sometimes they die. So really, Brian Thompson, because A to B to C to D, Brian Thompson has killed tens of thousands of people, so it's compassionate to shoot him. This is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. This isn't the way it works. There's a phrase, we're going to use our fancy Latin here, post hoc ergo propter hoc. It is a logical fallacy. It means, from the Latin, it means after this, therefore, because of this. So what it means is A and then B. B happens, therefore A. So something happens, and the thing that happened before it must have caused it. Brian Thompson's the head of United. United, therefore, it denied a claim. Therefore, this person died. So therefore, Brian Thompson all the way back at the beginning caused it. This is nonsense. It's not rational, logical thinking. This is actually a logical fallacy. But people are embracing this because they don't know any better. They think that murder is the solution to a problem. And I want to be the one to tell you, I'll take a brave stance here on the Chrestman Conversation. We're going to take a firm stance and say murder is not the solution to 99.99% of all problems in the world. I'm going to say that the times when you have to take another human being's life, apply in a very, very small thing, none of which should be pre-planned. You can't plan your way to a morally justifiable murder almost ever. With the exception of trying to assassinate the German generals trying to assassinate Adolf Hitler, for example. You're not going to assassinate your way to virtue. It's just not a way to get to where you want to go. Murder is not the solution. Because once it goes there, once you justify the killing of someone, let's imagine even for a second that I'm totally wrong. I know it's hard to imagine, but just try. Try to imagine that I'm totally wrong here about the causation. And Brian Thompson himself, the CEO of United Healthcare, really is responsible for the deaths of all these people. It's really his fault that the system is set up the way it is, and he's the one who's personally out there rubber stamping the denials that he knows are going to result in the death of people. Imagine that for a second, that I'm wrong, and that's the system. Could we kill him? Should we kill him? If your answer is yes, then I would push you further. Let's say your answer is yes. Then I say, what is the limiting principle that you will live by? Where do you say, well, here's the very clear definition of who we can and cannot murder? Because I have a very clear definition. My limiting principle is that we don't get to murder anyone. That's my principle. That's where it stands. We don't get to murder anyone, period. End of story. Because, again, murder and killing have different meanings, just like to assassinate someone, to murder someone, to kill someone. They all have different meanings. Killing people, sometimes, maybe, you need to do, because killing people can happen in self-defense. Killing people can happen in war. To murder someone means exactly what you think of when you think of the word murder. You think of a crime, because it is a crime to murder people. So the murder has a different definition. It basically means we have a person. They're not a threat to us, not in the immediate acute setting. And we are going to kill them to either take vengeance for something that's happened or to stop them from doing something we don't like. This is when we murder people. All right, this is murder. To kill someone would be the Daniel Penny situation. Daniel Penny killed Jordan Neely, or at least he contributed to his death in a way. That's not a murder. He didn't murder him. There was no malice in this interaction. He did something to defend people on a train. That's different. So let me ask you, if you think we should be able to murder Brian Thompson, because I'm wrong, and Brian Thompson's responsible for the deaths of lots of people, where is the limiting principle? How do you draw the line that says who we can and cannot murder? Because I would challenge you that that's very important, that you have a thing that you can say and set in stone that this is the way that it is going to be, and this is the rule, the law that we could pass that would say who we can and can't murder. I think, for example, if you agree with the 6th commandment that says, thou shalt not murder, that's probably a good limiting principle. You can't murder people, period. That's my rule. How do you justify this? People you don't like, that's a bad rule, because what about the people they don't like? Is it okay for them to murder? Or is it just you, because you happen to be the virtuous one who knows the best way in every aspect of life? You're the person who sits on high and gets to judge who can and can't be murdered. I don't think I'm that person. I don't get to choose who is killed and who is not. That's not my choice to make. Just like it's not your choice to make. So if you think you have the ability to justify in any rational, coherent sense the murder of another human being, I would challenge you that you are not that person. You cannot do that. Even if you dislike them. Even if they are objectively a bad person. No, you don't get to make that. You saying Luigi Mangione is a hero, or giving him any positive thought, any positive praise to say, well, I don't justify murder. However, if I don't justify murder comes with a however or a but afterwards, the entire point you're about to make is idiotic. I promise you. It's not going to be a good argument. I think it's wrong to murder people, but no, bad. Sit in time out. You're doing a bad thing right there. You are justifying, you're excusing murder, and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't ever do that, even if it's because someone is on, quote unquote, your side or your team. If Luigi Mangione was out there, I don't know. If he was out there, what would be a good example? If he was out there, he shot an abortion doctor, or he assassinated somebody who ran a gender-affirming clinic for children. And he was having the same kind of praise from people whom I would normally align with, people who are against, for example, late-term abortions or giving puberty blockers to kids. If he was on that side that I typically have been found on, I would think he's a terrible, monstrous person. If somebody went and took a shot at Kamala Harris, they're not on my side, because using political violence means that you're not my friend. It means that you are not a person that I want to associate with or have anything to do with, because you're a bad person and we don't associate with bad people. The people on the left seem to forget this. Somebody says something mean, and they're the first to jump on you and dogpile on you and say, oh, I can't believe someone would be this mean, or someone would say such a terrible thing. But then someone takes a shot at Donald Trump and they'll put him on a T-shirt. Oh, if only he had aimed a little better, they'll say. Ridiculous. Nonsense. You cannot excuse political violence ever. Period. End of story. You can't do it. This guy's not a hero. He's a bad person. And hopefully we'll just forget about him, because we shouldn't, just because he's a handsome guy, just because he looks good with the shirt off, and everyone wants to post that picture of him on the mountain or smiling and say, oh, look, Dave Franco's going to play him in a movie. I can't wait to see it. No. Bad. We don't care. It's like the difference that they say in HR. If a good-looking guy hits on you, it's a compliment. If a bad-looking guy hits on you, it's harassment. That again, I don't care that the certain female population finds this guy to be attractive and they say, oh, I can't wait for the conjugal visits. Stop it. Stop thirsting over a murderer, an assassin. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for society, and it's just bad all around. Anyway, we're rambling. We're rambling here because I really don't like this. I don't like the way the internet behaves. Especially on Twitter, you get people on there who want to just excuse the worst, most depraved human behaviors and interactions. And I'm no saint, okay? I'm not. I've done lots of things in life that are less than saintly. But there's a line that you just can't cross. Once you cross it, you can't come back. And excusing violence in any capacity against innocent people is a line that you don't want to cross, because, as I said in the intro, it always starts with people you don't like. It always starts with those other guys. Well, it's okay if it happens to them. They're bad. And then it goes to a different group, and you say, well, those guys are bad too. And then it goes around, and eventually it points at you, and you're in the group, and you say, well, I'm not a bad guy. And then all the other people outside the group say, oh, yeah, you are. And you have no defense, because what was the limiting principle that stopped you, that allowed you to rationalize hurting other people and then defend yourself? It doesn't exist unless you want to just rely on narcissism that says you're the most important thing. It doesn't exist unless your limiting principle is violence is wrong, period, full stop. Stop it there. Anyway, it just leads to anarchy, and it's not good for anyone. I want to talk about, now moving on to topic 2. Let's talk about transgenderism, as always, the topic that gets us in the most trouble on the internet. There's an issue before the Supreme Court. They heard arguments this week about this transgender law that was passed in Tennessee. Now, normally I'd read the statute in question, and I had it pulled up, but I hate it. I don't know. This is not a shot at Tennessee in any way, but it's worded terribly. It's too much legalese, and it just made me angry to read it because I said, why can't you just say what you mean? You can understand it. Anyone can understand it. It's not that it's overly complicated, like you're reading it and saying, I don't know what this is. It's not that. It's just worded terribly, and it's annoying. So instead of reading it, I'm just going to summarize it, which normally, again, we'd read it, but I'm just going to summarize it. Basically, the state of Tennessee, it banned doctors from performing any care that would cause a child to physically transition. So what does this mean? It means it made it illegal to prescribe puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones to children, and you're not allowed to do any surgeries, either on the genitalia or on the top, for anyone under the age of 18. Okay, so no gender-affirming, quote-unquote, gender-mutilating care for children under the age of 18. So the state of Tennessee put this law in effect. Immediately it was sued. It was sued by some parents of people under the age of 18. I think a clinic was in there, and at least one doctor from the state. And the case has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. So the question that everyone was asking this week is, what is the Supreme Court going to do? As you know, the Supreme Court has a conservative majority, but the conservative majority, especially Neil Gorsuch, has been a rather squishy on the issue. I don't know if you remember, he was the one. Neil Gorsuch was the vote. John Roberts and Neil Gorsuch were the votes that basically wrote transgenderism into civil rights law with, I can't remember the name of the decision off the top of my head, but they basically said that transgenderism is a protected characteristic. Anyway, so everyone's a little says, well, they're kind of squishy on this issue. Is this conservative Supreme Court going to do anything conservative? Basically, it looks like, after listening to the arguments for the last week, that they are going to uphold the ban. We won't know this until they announce it later, but this affects 23 states, and all the arguments, and you can go, actually, it's pretty cool. There is a SCOTUS blog out there, which you should just go read. It makes it very easy to summarize any court, because they kind of just, that's exactly what it does. It just summarizes what it does. It does a pretty decent job, I think, of just accurately stating what's happening and not giving it lean one way or the other, at least in the times I've read it. So it's called SCOTUS blog. You should go there, check it out. It's where I was getting a lot of my summation, basically, of the arguments. The conservative justices are arguing for that it's more appropriate for the legislatures in different states and the democratic process to take a look at these things than it is for judges to take a look at them. This seems like a completely reasonable, rational explanation for why they would kick this back down to the states and say that legislatures have the ability to regulate their own care. Because what it would do, in effect, is turn judges into having to be informed on medical issues, which is less likely than an entire group of legislatures being informed on the issues. What I mean by that is you have 9 judges on the Supreme Court. Imagine that all medical cases that have to do with what states can and can't do, what medical practices can and cannot be practiced in certain states, have to go up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court would then have to decide how states handled all of their medical care. They'd have to become experts on all of these issues. That's basically the argument. The argument doesn't even so much touch the transgender issue as it does the state's ability to regulate their own medical care within their boundaries. Excuse me. So there were some great arguments that the justices, basically the people who brought the case before the court, the people who are suing to basically overturn this law, they made some garbage arguments that make basically no sense. And actually, in their own statement, Justice Alito, he ripped one of the lawyers for the people bringing the lawsuit. He ripped them by basically saying, listen, in your lawsuit, in this brief, you basically list all of these reasons why transgender medication should be prescribed to children. And he said, but none of these appear to be true because you're saying, well, it lowers suicidality, but that's actually not been true. And it's done in all these other places, but they actually were overturned here. And can you show me any evidence that what you're saying in terms of the suicidal ideation of people gets better after surgery? Can you point to any evidence that confirms that? And the lawyer has to go, well, actually, no, not really. We don't really have that, and blah, 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 trying to play it off while completely evading the question that Alito actually asked. But basically just pokes a hole in the entire argument. The entire argument is that medicine has been shown to be helpful for people to transition early when they want to become male to female or female to male, that it helps children to transition early and it reduces the suicide rate. And it's the only way to save trans kids and make them live happy and healthy lives. And Lolito pointed out, well, actually, there were these large studies that were done that show that none of this is true and all of this data can't be replicated, and the suicide rate among trans teens doesn't actually change once they transition. So what are you talking about? And they have no argument. It's the most decisive. This will probably wind up being a 5-4, possibly a 6-3 decision. We'll see. It appears very likely that at least the 5 conservative justices are going to uphold this and allow states to regulate their own medical care. By far, if we're giving out trophies, Alito gets one for best questions during this. Clarence Thomas also had a couple good ones. I don't have those pulled up, though. The Alito one really stood out to me as just eviscerating any argument that lawyer was brought to the table. The trophy for the stupidest justice definitely goes to Ketanji Brown. She is just proving time and again that she might be the worst pick on the Supreme Court, at least that I can think of. I'm sure there are some who were terrible that really just faded into obscurity in history. But certainly in my lifetime, she is the dumbest person to sit on the bench. This line of questioning, and you know what? Actually, it's so good. Let me just bring it up because I have to. So excuse me for 1 second. We just got to bring this up because this is so dumb. I cannot handle it. Let me find it. Okay. So this is from the SCOTUS blog. It says, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson drew questioning back to the fundamental role of the court's authority on equal protection, invoking Loving v. Virginia, the Supreme Court's 1967 case striking down Virginia's ban on interracial marriage. In that case, she said, whether you could get married depended on your race, even as the law banned interracial marriage for all people. While here, access to puberty blockers hinges on the patient's sex assigned at birth. She noted that Virginia had also made arguments based in science to defend the ban on interracial marriage, and it contended that the court should defer to the legislature. If the court declines to hold that SB 1 should be subjected to heightened scrutiny, she said it would be ignoring bedrock precedent. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of her words. I'm not going to read the entire thing that she said, but she's an idiot. She is an idiot. Loving v. Virginia was a case that basically said that you're not allowed to outlaw interracial marriage. Explain to me how this is any way comparable to a law that says you're not allowed to give cross-sex hormones to children. What are the comparisons here? One, you're talking about race. One, you're talking about medical care. One has nothing to do with race. One has to do with what she's saying, gender. So the correlation here is apparently race and gender. Okay. One has to do with medical care. One doesn't. Okay. One has to do with discrimination based on race in which other people have access to the same service. So, for example, white people could go marry white people, black people could go marry black people, but white people couldn't marry black people, which is why it was discriminatory. What is the thing that we're outlawing here with this Tennessee ban? We're saying that girls can't get testosterone. Well, also, little boys can't get testosterone. That is also true. Girls can get little girls aren't prescribed estrogen. Little boys can't be prescribed estrogen. It's not even discriminating based on sex. What it's doing is saying, under the age of 18, you're not allowed to have life-changing medical care based on bad science. There's no correlation. There's nothing. And I think that the other judges also, you'll notice that nobody picked up on what she was saying or continued it on or made any reference to it again, she's a moron. This is embarrassingly bad. Maybe because she probably only knows the major cases in the Supreme Court history. She'll probably somehow find a relation back to Brown versus Board of Education is probably the only other case she knows. Oh, I know Loving versus Virginia, and I know Brown versus Board of Education, and maybe the Dred Scott decision. You probably read about it in a book one time. And so it's just like, it's just embarrassing that she sits on the bench and she just sounds like a stupid person. She sounds like she doesn't know what she's talking about. What is the correlation here? Please, please, please. The other thing that happened this week that I thought was funny is that the lawyer bringing the complaint, arguing before the Supreme Court, actually said in her arguments how, for example, the Scandinavian countries that were listed, they haven't really changed their guidelines. They haven't outlawed anything, and their guidelines haven't changed due to any of the new evidence that has come out. They just say that it's not necessary anymore. And then she actually says, and the UK hasn't banned this practice yet. But the UK just came out and banned it, I think the day after or 2 days after she made the argument. The UK has completely banned the practice of gender-affirming care for children. They banned it in the entire country. The National Health Service will not participate in this anymore. It's a good thing because the experimentation on children is not a kind or compassionate thing to do. I feel bad. I feel bad for parents who have been duped into thinking that this is the right thing to do. It's not. The science was always very shaky, and doctors are, I think in a lot of cases they're trying to do the right thing, but in some cases they certainly are not trying to do the right thing. And the kids, you feel the worst for the kids, the amount of people who are going to have to detransition and deal with the lifelong effects of this because they were lied to, that there are no permanent changes, and they were lied to that this is a reversible process, and they were lied to that this will make them happy. And they're going to grow up and realize that all these adults around them led them down a path which had made their life quality worse when they're adults. And I feel bad for all of them, but this is not the answer. It's not the answer to do this. And it doesn't come from a place that I don't want people to be happy. It comes from the exact opposite place. I want everyone to be happy, and this is not the solution. It is not the answer going forward that you will be happier as a child transitioning to the other gender. I promise you that in 99% of the cases, this will just not make you happy. It's not going to be the solution for you because something else in your life is probably wrong that really is what's making you upset, and this is not going to be the solution that just finds that happiness that you've been craving. And you feel bad for everyone involved, but it doesn't mean you have to go along with what they say because they are wrong and they are doing irreparable harm to children, and we can't let that stand. I think it's bad. And it's, again, in a personal level, doesn't mean you're not nice to people. It doesn't mean you don't treat people with compassion and respect. But what it does mean is you don't have to play along. And you shouldn't play along because it's not good for people. And none of the science, none of the studies that people are coming out with support this. And that's the thing that just drives me nuts. And it just drives me bonkers is that you can look at it and you can say none of the data actually suggests that this is making a noticeable improvement in our society or the mental health of children or the mental health of adults. And yet people say, but it's the nice thing to do. And you go, well, but if it makes people feel worse and leads to medical complications, why is this a good thing? And they don't have an answer other than compassion. And it's not compassionate to feed into other people's delusions. We don't do it with schizophrenic or people suffering from depression where they say, I'm depressed, I want to kill myself. And we say, well, if that's what makes you happy, we don't do that in any other case. But when someone comes out and says, well, I think I want to be a girl today, we say, well, good for you, Timmy, we'll call you Sally. And you go, what? How? What? Why? Why is that nice? Why is that the good thing? Why is that the quick solution? Shouldn't we say, hey, well, what makes you feel like that? Maybe we should talk to someone about that and see what we can do. But no, apparently that's hateful. Anyway, that's it. We're going to our last topic. What time is it? Ooh, we're going to make this quick. Okay, let's talk about Syria. Who remembers Syria? Syria's been in the news. We remember it. It's a country. It exists there in the Middle East, right? Let's pull up our map, our handy-dandy Middle East map. Middle East map. Boom, boom, boom. Go to images. Ooh, wow. Okay, there we go. Boom, here we are. Let's see this fancy Middle East map so we know what we're talking about when we talk about it. Okay, so here we are. Let's look at our Middle East map, all these highlighted countries here in our Encyclopedia Britannica. So we're talking about Syria. Where is Syria? Syria is right here. As you'll notice, it is on the border of Turkey. It's on the border of Iraq, borders Jordan. I wonder if we can zoom in more. Well, a little bit. So you'll see right next to it right here, it's a little small on the picture. Right next to it right here is Lebanon. Underneath there is Israel. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about Syria, and so you can keep in mind all the things I'm going to say. So Syria, oh, look, you can see all my notes. Syria has been in a civil war for the last 13 years. And we know this a little bit in the United States because we haven't paid attention to it, because at times the tensions have been high and the tensions have been low, but they've been fighting for 13 years. And at times we paid really close attention to this because there were some terrible things that happened, but for the most part it just faded into the back of our minds. But then this week it came front and center because all of a sudden, after 13 years of fighting, the war basically disintegrated. And it is now over. And there is a winner, and it is not the guy who's been leading the country for the last 13 years. The leader is a nasty war criminal. His name is Bashar al-Assad. And we remember Assad because he was the guy who used chemical warfare on his own people after President Obama said there's a red line. We were going to get involved in Syria if they broke the Geneva Convention. He broke the Geneva Convention, and then nothing really happened. Assad has been propped up due to two factors. He had support from Russia, military support that basically gave him the edge in this civil war. And he also had some dealings with Iran that made him a little bit more powerful in the region. Some of this was funneling money and troops through his country, and they gave him support because of this through their proxies. Now, the reason why this war came to a sudden end this week is twofold. We have Ukraine and we have Israel, and we can blame the fall of Syria on those two things. Ukraine has tied up Russian arms and support and money in this conflict, and Russia, basically, Assad flew to Russia and said, hey, I need your help, and Russia said, kick rocks, man, we got our own problems, and had to send him back without anything to help him. And Israel, and God bless them, these people over here in Israel, they have destroyed the Iranian proxies. Both they completely wiped out Hamas, and they have really negatively impacted the military capacity. They killed basically everyone in the higher-ups in Hezbollah, and basically stopped Iran from having all of this terror network that they had exported out through the world by basically knocking these pillars out from the Middle East. So if we look, let's look back at our map real quick. Okay, let's look back at our map. So here's Iran. Here's Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. Basically, Iran has used Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and then parts of Palestine here to have basically what they call this crescent of terrorism right here, because Iran does not like Iraq. They don't like Saudi Arabia. They don't get along with Yemen or Oman. They basically have this right here that exerts power and influence throughout the region. Well, Israel, this little tiny country right here, destroyed Hamas in Palestine, destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon. So all of a sudden, these two things right here didn't exist for Iran. Syria is fighting their own war, but Iran has no money to supply them. Turkey, meanwhile, is also looking to capture territory in northern Syria. So the Israeli war against terrorism and the Russian war with Ukraine led to no support for Assad. And without support from external forces, Assad basically fled the country this week. He went to Russia where he's going to claim asylum. This reminds me of Saddam Hussein. And because Saddam Hussein is a bad guy. He's a bad, evil man. Make no mistake about this. But did the world, it's an interesting question, did the world get better when Saddam Hussein died? What do you think? I don't know the answer to that question. And I think you could say, well, yes, because he was a terrible, evil, bad man, one of the worst men of the 20th century. I'm not disagreeing with you. But, and here's the but, the interesting but, what he did manage to do in Iraq was he kept the terrorism at a small level. It is a very minute level in Iraq because he was such a iron-fisted dictator that the Islamist forces in that country did not really exist. They didn't have a lot of terrorism in Iraq. They didn't have a lot of criminality in Iraq because one of the things about being a dictator is that when you rule with an iron fist, people are afraid of you, as they rightly should be. Saddam Hussein was a scary man. When he died, Iraq basically opened up. It became a pass-through for terrorism. The crime got worse. Everything in that country kind of got a little worse for the people who live in Iraq, which is weird because it seems paradoxical that a bad man could make the country a little bit safer and better, but that's kind of what happened. And then he died, and then all of a sudden you had this gigantic explosion of terrorism in the region. It gave rise to ISIS, for example, when there were problems in Iraq. I don't know if you remember, but the ISIS, it basically stood for the Islamic States of Iraq and Syria because there was no one in Iraq to stop them from rising. So you had this, and now Assad is gone, and Assad is a bad man. No one likes him. All right, the Russians might like him. I don't like him. You don't like him. Good people don't like him. He's a bad guy. He does bad things, and he's been a terrible person to have existed in the world. Not going to hear an argument from me, but he's gone. Is it a good thing that the leader who's taking control of the country is also just a terrible guy? I don't know. Is life going to get better in Syria? I certainly don't know. You don't know. No one knows. Is it going to get worse? It's a possibility. There's that phrase, always take the devil you know. It might be true in a lot of cases that it's better to have some guy who's kind of a known quantity than this guy who's a big mystery. And this guy, he's not really that big of a mystery. Because let's remember, we know a little bit about him. His name is Abu Mohammed al-Jolani. And I wouldn't say he's a household name, but we know who he is. He's trying to clean up his image this week, apparently, and he has switched names. He's gone back to his birth name because al-Jolani was a basically, I don't know, nickname, I guess, if whatever you want to say. It's a nickname that was given to him or that he coined himself. And he's gone back to his birth name, which is Amin al-Shara. And he is a terrorist. Make no mistake about this. He fought for Al-Qaeda. He fought for ISIS. Then he split off because he had disagreements with both those groups. And now he is leading a full group of terrorists that have taken over the country. Is it a good thing? No. No, I don't think it's a good thing. Even when my enemies do poorly, if my other enemies succeed by doing that, sometimes it's better to have them in conflict. Maybe it would have been better if this had just been a prolonged civil war that kept both sides at a stalemate and weak so that they couldn't do anything. This guy takes over. Terrorists run the country now. That's what it means to me. I don't care what he calls himself. I don't care. He might be the next Baghdadi, who the Washington Post might call them an austere religious scholar, but he's not tricking me. He's a terrorist. He doesn't like me. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like people who don't agree with him, and he wants to kill them. That's what he will do. That's what he wants in this world. He wants to wage jihad throughout the world. I don't care if he wants to do it in a nicer way by dressing like a Westerner and trying to pretend that he's a moderate. He's not. He is a radical Islamist, and it's not a good thing that he runs the country now. So we'll see. Maybe this group that he has, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't heard a lot of people say the name. I think it's Hayat Tahrir al-Am. I think most people will probably just wind up calling it HTS. We'll see if his group, HTS, becomes as familiar to us as ISIS or the Taliban, or if this results in another war. I'm hoping If it does, it's a good thing we have Donald Trump coming in. I don't know if you remember what he did with ISIS, but they said, hey, it's going to take us years and years and years to beat them. And he came in and took like a month because he just said to the military, hey, go do your jobs and go kill them. He didn't give them a bunch of stupid rules. He didn't say, let me babysit and police you. He said, go kill the bad guys. So it's a good thing he's coming in. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. We'll see. I don't know. I'm skeptical that this is going to wind up being a good thing for the world, as you should be too. You should always be skeptical about everything, especially what I say. Why are you listening to me? Who knows? Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. And as always, questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments. Give me a like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff that I tell you to do every week. And I will catch you guys next Friday.